Now we're going to get into exploiting players with post-flop leaks in short deck. So what are some common post-flop leaks that players have when they transition to short deck from other forms of poker? Well, one of the biggest that I've been talking about a lot in this course is slow playing. You don't want to slow play in this game. It's very rare, the circumstances in which you do. I can teach you what to do against opponents who do slow play. Also have situations where a player c-bets boards just because they're c-bettable in no limit hold'em, right? A no limit hold'em player comes over, he gets a specific board that a no limit hold'em would be a snap c-bet, does it in short deck, we can really burn him there. Not playing up and down straight draws aggressively is a common mistake of players coming into this game. They don't realize the value of those up and down straight draws. A little bit less common of a mistake, that's one of the little nuggets that most people, I think, hear before they ever play their first hand of short deck. It's just that up and down straight draws are more valuable here, but nonetheless, I've seen people do it. The opponent doesn't semi-bluff pair plus gutter type hands, which have more value in this game than a no limit hold'em because, of course, you're more likely to hit that gutter ball and you're more likely to hit trips with your pair. And finally, the villain fails to overbet shove for protection, which is important in this game just because of how close equities run, because of how much equities can change with one turn card or river card. Let's talk about exploiting a villain who slow plays. So again, slow playing in this game with all the hands that you'd slow play in no limit hold'em is the biggest mistake that you can make in short deck. You're just allowing your opponents to catch up to you in equity. Equities change so quickly in this game, it is not a good idea to slow play. So when you're playing against an opponent who likes to slow play and they enter the pot pre-flop, we can loosen up our limping and raising ranges a bit because we're going to be able to realize more equity against them post-flop because, of course, a normal player in their shoes, if they flop two pair or if they flopped a set or, if they had all these other strong hands, they would bet and they would charge us to get a turn card, whereas against these players, a lot of times we're just going to be able to check it back and get a turn card for free. Also, when people like to slow play, when they check to us, we don't want to bet thin for value or protection anymore, because remember they have those traps in their range that most players would not in this game. Also, for that reason, we do want to check back some of our draws that we might normally bet, but we would actually fold to a check raise. So let's say we have a hand like a gut shot or a pair plus a gutter or overcards or a backdoor nut flush draw. All these types of hands are hands that when a GTO player checks to us in short deck, we want to go ahead and take a stab to try to take down the pot. We're not expecting to get check raised a disproportionate amount of the time. However, against players who like to slow play and who don't lead with their strong hands, they're going to be more likely to check raise us since they failed to lead. And as a result, we don't want to be in situations where we need to fold our backdoor nut flush draw or our gut shots or whatever else. So we want to be checking back to flop more often in those type of situations. Also, when we are bet into, we now want to call and bluff raise wider, right? Because, again, they're not leading into us with those strong hands. They're slow playing them. So the hands that they are betting into us with, maybe an up and down straight draw, maybe a hand like a flush draw, maybe, hands just aren't as strong as the two pairs and sets and all these other hands that the full houses that they're trying to slow play. What about if you're playing against somebody who comes over from, the no limit hold'em game and it's one of their first times playing short deck and they're just c-betting c-betting away. They're c-betting to their heart's content. They're over c-betting, not realizing that the pre-flop range advantage in short deck actually matters quite a bit less than it does in no limit hold'em, because those equities are subject to change on the flop more than they are in no limit hold'em, and also now realizing the intricacies of the board textures and how they change in short deck versus no limit hold'em. How are we going to deal with a guy like this? Well, one thing we want to do is we want to flat their open wider pre-flop, because we have more implied odds here. So, somebody opens from the cutoff and we're on the button and we have a hand that, normally we'd even against the cutoff, we'd fold here, the old 10-7 offsuit. Well, maybe we want to go ahead and flat, because we know that they're going to put out basically a dark bet on the flop, or that they're going to do that very, very frequently, even when their equity sucks. We also want to bluff raise, obviously, and float the flop weak very often, because these players are basically shoveling in money in c-bet type scenarios where they have nothing. So we don't even need to go with a super large size on our bluff raise relative to other sizings in short deck. A lot of times in short deck, somebody bets the flop. It's basically, if you started the hand with 100 antes, it's very rare for you to have a bluff raise fold range. But against certain players like this on super dry boards, ace 6-6, you actually could have a bluff min raise or 2.2x range here. And we also want to float the flop weak. If we flop just like backdoor hearts with an overcard, normally against an opponent who c-bets normal ranges on this board, we're not going to expect him to be out of line too much or have too many, have a disproportionate number of check folds on the turn. But against somebody who's just firing out, willy-nilly, we might want to float here, because we're going to get check folds on a decent amount of turns. We're also going to choose to, instead of reshoving with all the hands that the chart indicates we should reshove, we're actually going to flat some of these hands over the villain's open. And we could do this with some of the hands in the middle and even some of our stronger hands. So, against a villain who just basically c-bets everything at 100 antes, we can kind of flat and slow play our aces, even on the button, right? They open the cutoff or the hijack, and now it's on us, and we have aces. This isn't a hand we normally want to slow play, and in fact, we don't want to slow play in general in this game. But it's actually less of a slow play. It's kind of like a situation where that they're going to commit the chips post flop anyway. So you kind of get the option to continue or not. Aces, I think, is a better example here than ace king, simply because ace king actually benefits from getting that pre-flop fold quite a bit. You don't allow your opponent to realize the equity on the flop that they might realize, whereas aces, you're not as concerned about them making a straight or a flush or two pair on the flop when you have pocket aces. I guess two pairs, all of those hands would beat you, right? Whereas when they do make one pair, you're not behind. Whereas with ace king, if they make a pair, you could be behind. So also some of the weaker hands that we were gonna re-raise all in as a steal, right? Let's say the ace 10 suited or the jack 10 suited that we're shoving with as a steal. Well, now we're just going to flat those hands because we have position and our opponent's basically going to be betting large into us very, very frequently, and then we're going to have a good idea about how to proceed. We're also going to strongly attack certain board types. So like the 8-8 king, when we're the defensive player pre-flop, this seems like a very, very c-bettable board in no limit hold'em, right? If you raise and the big blind defends and they check over to you, you're the pre-flop raiser, you expect to get through your c-bet on the king 8-8 board often. In short deck, we're going to have just a lot more 8s in our range, having defended the button, for example. So we want to attack those boards either by doing that min raise strategy I was telling you about, or floating more often. Also the 6, 7, 10. These type of boards look like they're decent c-bet candidates in no limit hold'em. However, you don't want to be firing out, especially when our opponent raised from earlier position, and their range is really weighted towards hands like ace king, ace queen, queen jack suited. These type of hands, this type of board texture, they're just going to be betting and then overfolding. And of course, even a board like ace 6, 7, right? In no limit hold'em, when you have ace queen, ace king on ace 6, 7, you don't have a worry in the world, right? Whereas in short deck, if they raised an early position here, they actually have a much more capped top of their range than we do. It's very, very unlikely that they have 2-pair. It's very, very unlikely that they have a straight, right? They're probably not raising 9-8 suited from earlier position. We can have all those hands. So we want to be putting pressure on them on these type of boards. All right, let's go into some more ways to exploit these over c-betters. We also want to occasionally fight. So I talked about slow playing like the pocket aces pre-flop. Post-flop, because they're just shoveling in dead money, we want to sometimes, only in the best opportunities, find cases to actually slow play strong. And we want to select hands that are not vulnerable. So there we go. If we have a flush, right, not too many bad things are going to happen for us in this pot. We're facing somebody who is putting in money with a very wide range on the flop. We want to encourage them to continue to bluff into us on the turn, so we're going to call and slow play. What's another example? Obviously, if we have king jack on king jack jack, right, this board, it's less likely that our opponent is going to continue to fire on a bluff, but if we're literally facing somebody who's like c-betting 80% or something crazy, we want to give them that opportunity to hang themselves. Maybe they take a hand like pocket 8s and say, hey, you know what, I can make a full house. Turn 6, they continue to bet with their pocket 8s because they got 2 outs to a full house, or effectively 4 outs to a full house, but 2 outs to a disguised full house going to the river. Then we're in really good shape here with slow playing our king jack. And the final one is actually 8-9 on that ace 6, 7 board. This is a hand where, of course an 8 or a 9 could come and then we don't like life as much as we do right now, but we still don't dislike life. There's really no turn card that can come where we're really afraid. Even if an ace rolls off, again, they raised in early or even late position, then it's very, very unlikely that they have a full house. So this is a good slow play spot against somebody who's over barrely and over c-betty, especially because on these they have been programmed from playing no limit hold'em to fire multiple barrels on these ace high kind of boards where the pre-flop caller is seldom going to have ace king or ace queen. So what do? We put on max pressure over multiple streets. Not the case in this game. All right, what if you're playing against somebody who doesn't realize the value of up and down straight draws and they don't play them aggressively enough? Well, first of all, as this has been a common theme, when they enter the pot pre-flop, we want to loosen up our limping and raising ranges behind them, just because we're going to be able to realize more equity post-flop. They're not going to be check shoving on us. They're not going to be overbet shoving on us. They're not going to be betting big with their up and down straight draws. We're going to be able to make it to see more cards post-flop and realize more equity. We also want to bet for protection more liberally against these players on boards that have straight draws, because we're no longer concerned about them check shoving these boards. Here are some examples. So if we have Jack 8 on Jack 10 6, and we were playing against a normal, competent, short deck opponent, would we take a stab with this hand if check 2? Would we take a stab with this hand if there were players behind us? Under normal circumstances, you'd be a little bit wary to bet this simply because your opponent might be giving you the pile with 8-9, Queen-9, King-Queen. Against a player like this, it's a much more reasonable play to bet the pair of jacks. Here's another example. If we have Ace-10 on Ace-8-9, right? This is a hand that could benefit from getting some protection. It could possibly get a little bit of value. Now, when it does check back, it's not the end of the world. Any turn card that could come. This is a hand that is still going to have good playability going to the turn. But against a player who's not check raising the hands like Jack 10 or even Queen 10, which would be common hands on this board, or 10-7 potentially, but Jack 10 is the most common, then we should go ahead and c-bet this Ace 10 here for value.